So good evening, TNT family. We are fortunate here tonight to have Mr. Ved Seereeram. Mr. Seereeram has a background in banking, and he is involved in a lot of financial affairs of TNT. So, Mr. Seereeram, I want to welcome you to UNC USA and for thank you for taking the time to inform and educate us. We are curious about the status of our financial affairs in Trinidad and Tobago, and we are very concerned of the nature of the banking industry, what is taking place, because we don't see a very customer friendly or ease of doing business with the bank. There seems to be so much complication. Things have become so difficult in my view. I mean, so we would like if you can give us a little insight on that, what's taking place in the country there on the nature of things. If you can tell us a little bit about what's taking place there. But first, I want you to introduce yourself, give us a little background about you and what you've been doing.
Thank you, Gary, and good night to all viewers and listeners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about something that is very passionate to me, the question of the banking industry, as well as the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, and significant mismanagement over the years. I'm also very interested in seeing a turnaround in Trinidad and to look at the ever elusive objective of diversifying this country and getting away from oil and gas. Not that we'll give up oil and gas, we'll have to maximize our use of for oil, from oil and gas, but at the same time, we have to look at diversifying this economy as we go forward. When you look at the global economy, the 2007 2008 crash was all due to the banking sector mismanagement and fraudulent activities in the banking sector, which has not been properly analyzed in my view, and therefore we are in the verge of repeating it again, because the international banking sector is very fragile compared to a few years ago, and in fact it could be worse than in 2007. The question is, a small country like Trinidad and Tobago, are we prepared for it? And my feeling is that we are not prepared for it, because there could be several international events that could make life very difficult with regards to globalization. There's a change in globalization, and a lot of countries have realized that they have to become self-sufficient in many ways. China itself have declared that they have to depend on local activities to really resurrect that economy. America, you're seeing the quantum of tariffs and so on to be able to generate economic activities within the confines, within the boundaries of America. So these trends are taking place, and in Trinidad, we seem to be oblivious to these trends, hoping that, look, God is a Trini and things will be okay. But when you examine trends in the world and the activities and actions and the mismanagement by the commercial banks, investment banks, and so on, we have not learned our lessons of 2008, and I suspect we are going to repeat it in a very devastating way that will impact on us. If we come back now to the banking in Trinidad and Tobago, I worked with the banking sector for 20 years. Um, I left I left banking in 2000, 1998 actually. So, and then went off as a consultant on my own. I challenged the banking sector, and it's once you go against the establishment, you can expect a ton of bricks coming on your head. But I've survived the last 27 years outside the banking sector, but still dealing with issues concerning the banking sector. Our banking sector in Trinidad has degenerated compared to 25, 30 years ago. We have degenerated in the sense that moral obligation. There's no moral obligation on behalf of the banks to really act in a civilized manner towards their customers. I'll give you a simple example. When pensioners get their checks, they go and line up to the bank. Some of the banks are totally crowded. Do you know they do not have a toilet available for their customers? They don't. And many of us, fortunately for me, not so far, they suffer from incontinence. What are they going to do? So
Yeah,
therefore,
I see that. I see that clearly. Go ahead.
the services in the banking sector is not friendly. It is not customer oriented, and they do as they like. My last article, which I'm glad that the papers publish it, demonstrated the greed that the First Citizen Bank are actually hoarding US dollars, hard currencies, and they are not giving their customers that money. And it begs the question, who owns the foreign currency in this country? And it has to be the citizens of this country, and therefore it must be managed in such a manner that is equitably distributed. Failing which, we are going to end up in a situation where a lot of the SMEs, the small and medium-sized businesses, they're going to be deprived of their livelihood by not accessing US dollars. When you look at the state of the economy, the structure of our economy, we import over 90% of our food. I had looked at a recent chart. 90% of our food we import compared to Ghana, and I suspect that is changing dramatically given their oil revenues now. They are 34, 35%. So why we can't be self-sufficient in food? And many countries, if you are, I'm looking at Burkano, uh, that particular African country, and they said, look, we have to be self-sufficient in food within the next few years. So we cannot exist at the moment without foreign exchange, and that is being confiscated by a few industries in Trinidad and Tobago, which leaves us, the ordinary citizens, at a significant disadvantage. Now, when an ordinary citizen has to go to buy US dollars in the black market, they're paying 8 and 10, whilst the large businesses, they're still buying at 6.75. So therefore, they lose the small businesses are at a competitive disadvantage. But the situation is far worse because both regulators and the government are not looking at these critical issues and intervening to ensure that there's equitable distribution in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are all left to scramble on our own and survival of the fittest. And I don't think that a civilized society should depend upon survival of the fittest for the simple reason the whole idea of getting together as a society, as a nation, is that we we appoint or we elect or we select a government to take care of every citizen as we move along in a path of national nation building. So it's a free for all in Trinidad. I brought this to the attention of the citizens and the regulators and the government and the opposition via the article in the papers, and I'm waiting to see what is going to happen. Because my next step really is to write to the central bank and to the government and say, please look into this immediately, because no one, very few persons are attending to the needs of this ordinary citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. I've been dealing with the banks for fighting, say, banking issues for over the last uh, 7 years now, 27 years now. And there's several major changes that I've been able to bring about, unrecognized by the media, unrecognized by anyone, because I normally do these things very low key. I sent you the Times article, which dealt with some of the work. I've since done many other investigations apart from what was covered in the Times magazine. Um, so there's a lot of improvement required in Trinidad and Tobago. The other problem is that we are still hoping on the Dragon gas. That's the deal with Venezuela. And I think we have all learned as a child that our parents would advise us, please be careful with the company you keep. Please be careful with the company you keep. Why are we dealing with Maduro and Venezuela, hoping to get someone because of financial reasons? Why? And I suspect that particular transaction would not happen. That leaves us in a lurch because right now we are like the donkey with the carrot in front of us, hoping that we get some gas and some miracle happens that we go back to the good old days where gas and oil was flowing in Trinidad and Tobago. So we are depending now. It's very much like we have bought a lottery ticket and we are waiting for the winnings. But you cannot govern a country with such false hope. You have to do something in the meantime. And the question arises, how do you diversify this economy? And there's several golden opportunities that we are not grasping. I was fortunate to be part of the manifesto, the UNC manifesto of 2015. And since 2007, I went to Mr. Pandey and said, Mr. Pandey, go on the platform and say you're going to start back the sugar industry. He looked at me with a blank stare until I gave him a brief paper on it. And he did go on the platform and said, look, we are going to start back the sugar industry. Now, the sugar industry, that is one. Rice industry is another. We can start back the tobacco industry here. Why are we importing all of those things to kill ourselves? We're paying somebody else. We might as well pay ourselves. So there's several things that can be done locally. Food security should be the number one priority. Number
I
one
totally
priority.
agree with you on that. And I see that as a very high priority that we have not really focused on. But go ahead.
But a very simple way to get to diversify this economy and with regards to food security, we cannot. There's no country in the world that diversify their economy with a strong currency. None. Why do you think China has dominated the world? Over 30% of they contribute to international trade, and that is because they regulated their currency to have a weaker currency, and therefore they had an advantage in the global market. We are holding on to this currency as if for it to reach the market rate, as if this country is going to blow up, and which is foolishness. We all know it, that demand and supply, reach some form of equilibrium. My I propose on several of my writings and communication with economists and so on, policymakers, is that we cannot allow our currency to float, as in the case of Guyana and Jamaica. We have to control it because, unlike other commodities, when prices go up, demand goes down. With regards to exchange rate, when price when price goes up, when the price of US dollar goes up, demand actually goes up because speculation sets in. Speculators will say, wait a minute, if we are going to experience a devaluation, let me buy as much as I could, and that itself fuels a further devaluation. We don't want that situation. So I've been proposing a 10-to-1, but all the economists and all politicians are so scared to take that step. The second, the second control that we need to exercise, second variable, is a negative listing. As it is, if we have an Elon Musk in Trinidad and he wants to go to the moon, he can single-handedly buy all the currency, all the foreign exchange, and goes to the moon. Where does that leave the rest of us? So we must have government establishing a negative list. We have done it in the past. Gary, probably you're too young to remember or to know when Mr. Mohammed, he was Minister of Agriculture at the time. He put a negative list on tomatoes, and within a few months we were self-sufficient in tomatoes. So
Yeah,
we
I
have
think I
to.
remember a little bit of that where he said to eat pumpkin instead of apple.
Well, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
But Pomsite, I think they call it apple as well, you know. So you are so correct. We have to live within our means. So two things. One is devaluation of the currency to a fixed rate of 10 to 1. There will be pain at first, but believe me, it's going to work out in the end. If you look at Argentina, Milei devalued the currency significantly, and all the economic indicators they are on the verge of turning around. Inflation is down to 2% per month compared to probably 100% before. So we have to take a little pain. It's going to come in any case, whether we like it or not, is going to happen. Is because what we have been managing this country by just stretching the rubber band. We keep stretching the rubber band and stretching. At one point, it's going to burst, and at that point, all hell is going to break loose. So there are certain things we can do now. Let's say the UNC, I think they have a very good chance of getting back into power. They have to be careful of all the promises they're making because they're going to meet an empty treasury. So I think a lot of us are waiting on bated breath. Where's your manifesto? What are your plans? So I think for Trinidad, I would tell you I'm very hopeful for Trinidad because there are lots of good things that we can invest in to turn around Trinidad and Tobago. I'll be delighted to talk about those things. I've written about them on many occasions. We need investors. We need investors. But the two major variables at the in the hands of the government will be an adjustment of the exchange rate. That's one, and secondly, a negative list. And those two things can bring about dramatic change. The third thing I must say is that are we getting the best deal from our oil and gas sector? And I think the experts can answer. The last I heard, we have no monitoring, no controls of the amount of oil and gas and so on oil that is shipped away. We have no control. Nobody's there at the pump checking to see, just like a gas station. You can see the amount of oil that is being exported from the offshore fields. We saw we saw the level of fraud with regards to Petrotrin, and that has to still be investigated. That should be on the agenda of hopefully the new government coming in. That must be investigated because there are over 100, 200 million of fake oil that the country paid for. And quite frankly, that may have gone back into the politics to fund elections and so on. That's the nature of business here. So that has to be investigated. The shutdown of the oil refinery, that has to be investigated. Because when you are in charge of a government, you have to make sure that they establish procedures in place with regards to governance. I just wrote an article. I'll share it with you. It's coming out next Tuesday, where the whole sale of the refinery was a farce. The whole sale of the refinery was a farce. And we see the amount of money government spend on these farcical exercises by paying lawyers, by paying technicians, by paying consultants, etc., is an enormous amount of money that is being wasted. I hope that we can have a DOGE uh, uh, department set up in Trinidad to look at the amount of waste because they engage in tremendous billions of dollars wastages and no accountability at all. They smile with it. They smile with it. And quite frankly, all of that is falling on the backs of the ordinary citizens one way or the next. So I think the question of governance, times are changing. 2025 is a very different world than before. People are not as tolerant of governments again, and things are happening. And hopefully, that with the courage that you all have to bring things to the fore, people can openly talk about it and create a path, a sustainable path for recovery, starting with the country. And I think there's a tremendous amount of work that can be done. I haven't given up on Trinidad. I mean, um, for the simple reason that we have a tremendous amount of infrastructure investment in Trinidad that's already there, apart from the roads and water and certain basic things. I think we have a great opportunity, but what it calls for, it was proper management. That's what it's called for in Trinidad and Tobago today. And stop the wastage and make meaningful investments. Now, if you look at some countries, and I've been looking at Burkina Faso very, very carefully, the gentleman Ibrahim Traore has been in power for 2 years. Granted, he didn't come through a democratic process, so he's coming from the army, he just took over the government. He has made such tremendous strides within those 2 years that for the last 10, 15 years, we have not seen changes in Trinidad. And simple things. He said, look, we must feed ourselves. So got a tomato puree uh, factory running, and now they are canning tomatoes. Do you know we're probably on the same latitude as them, and they are becoming self-sufficient in potato. So we have to ask the question with regards, let's say, food security. That's one limb. Let me just mention a few others that we should be thinking about seriously. Food security, that is number one. Food processing, that's part of that particular, um, I would say, group of activities. So that's food, grow what we eat what we grow. Now, I want to differentiate. Eat what we grow, meaning to say we don't have to have apples, we can have pomsite, we can have fruits, etc., etc. Once we are able to manage, because we it's very cyclical, we have periods of abundance and periods of drought with regards to the production of vegetables and so on. So therefore we need urgently processing plants, meaningful processing plants. Years ago, the pineapple farmers, one of the leaders there, asked me to look at setting purchasing a plant to process pineapples and put it very similar to dole. That's with the hole in the center and canning it and so on. And quite frankly, the cost of a small plant was about 500,000 US dollars. So we could become self sufficient in that because there's a lot of pineapple being wasted, and it's a golden opportunity to set up a processing plant. The other area, potatoes that Burkina Faso started to grow, and they're harvesting probably millions of tons at the moment. We are in the same latitude, and therefore we can also grow potatoes. Think about it. What are the basic items that we consume? Chicken and chips is very, very popular in Trinidad. I suspect we are the largest per capita consumption of chicken and chips in the world. So if we can grow our own potatoes and supplement it with sweet potato chips, which I must congratulate Kentucky for doing that. So those are things we can be self-sufficient in. With regards to chicken, unfortunately, when you look at the grow out, there's a tremendous amount of imports by way of feed. Now we can grow our own feed. Sorghum can be grown here very easily. Caroni has done it before. Caroni actually, my cousin was letting me know that they actually planted, spread the sorghum seed by way of the aeroplane, and the growth was so abundant. So I'm saying we have to look at Trinidad and Tobago seriously and say what are the changes can be made. Now these are simple changes that will bring about job security for thousands. Job security for thousands. So why can't we get going on it? Forget the racial divide, forget everything. Everybody will have an opportunity. The dairy industry, let me cover that a bit. At one point, we were producing over 11 million liters of milk. Right now, we are down to less than 1 million. At the moment, there's a tremendous amount of import from milk from Germany, from all over the world, probably England, New Zealand. So, milk, butter, cheese, we can have an independent dairy industry. Our problem, I'll tell you our problem. We always say that it's cheaper to import. Yes, it's cheaper to import because our currency is too strong. Our currency is too strong. But if you don't have hard currency, what are you going to import with? If you look at the government finances and the country finances, yes, we have about $7 billion in foreign investments, but we also have more than that in loans. So on a net basis, we are negative. We do not have foreign exchange. We do not have foreign exchange. So where are we going now? To say, okay, let's hold on to a very strong currency exchange rate at 6.75 to 1. But if you don't have anything, then you have to make it. If you want it, you have to make it. Look at another industry, a very exciting industry in my view, is the furniture industry. I myself have planted about 40 acres and trees. I'm not an agronomist, I'm not a professional farmer, it's something like a hobby. But some of those trees are 20 some years now, and I could hardly wrap my hands around it. Just imagine, just imagine if we had professional agriculturists and who are very conversant in the technical aspect of tree, of growing trees and so on. The 150 acres, 50,000 acres that was planted in cane. Surely we could have put about 50,000 in trees 20 some years ago. Do you know the value that we would have had today? The value? And that would have spawned a tremendous furniture industry. So we no longer courts should be importing, we should be manufacturing all these things by now. It's not so technical. We have to change what we are learning at university. We have to become more practical, So I'm looking at if people are willing to listen, I'm willing to put together a blueprint to get Trinidad going again, to get it going again. Another major area, Gary, if I could touch on, do you know we're
Please
shipping
feel
out
free to
all
touch on
our,
anything you want to.
do you know we are shipping out all our steel and ferrous material? We're shipping it out. I checked a small plant of 200 tons per day, 100 to 200 tons per day, to smelt the scrap and make 200 tons of billets or rods or whatever shape you want, or flats or anything like that. And the cost was 12 million US dollars. 12 million US dollars. So those are the things we should be invested in. So if we've done that, at the moment we are shipping out all our raw materials. So we ask, what raw materials do we really have? And I'll tell you, steel is a major raw material that we do not count on the list of the raw materials we have. Paper is another area. I'd put together a whole, I would call it a blueprint for recommencing the sugar industry. I'd mentioned that before when I told Mr. Pandey, started back. We can start it back on a very, what I would call scientific, scientific base, right? Technology for harvesting has changed over the years. We no longer need these large cane cutting machines. They're much smaller ones. A walk behind machine, two persons could harvest 40 tons for the day. Wouldn't that be something attractive or put people back to work? So when when you put together a sugar industry on modern practices, there's a tremendous amount of foreign exchange saving that we can bring about. We import about 80 uh, thousand tons, I think, per annum. 80,000. That's a tremendous amount. It's over about 400 million TT dollars that we spend. All of that could be plowed back into the economy because you do not need foreign input with regards to cultivation of cane. If you go down the Solomon Huchoy Highway, you will still see cane that have been abandoned since probably almost 20 years, still attempting to grow, and that is the crop that we killed. That is the crop we got rid of. That is the industry we got rid of. So, there's too many things to be done in Trinidad. Um, so rather than looking for oil in that elusive um, uh, area between Venezuela and ourselves, and quite frankly, we don't make much money from oil again. The large corporations, the large oil companies, they're the ones who are making money from oil, and we are just probably with our hands held out, be happy with whatever we get, but we are not monitoring that industry properly. So, you know, Gary, there's so many positive things to do. Hopefully, the UNC said they're putting together a manifesto. Personally, I think they're taking too long, because on the platform, if you guys have influence, I think they should start talking about what they will do. What they will do. Now, they have been talking about um, hiring so many more doctors, so many more nurses. Let me tell you, that is just expense. Those are just expense. We need to see how to preserve the foreign exchange, and that is one section by itself. We need to be self sufficient in food. Right now, we I'm calling myself we because I've been delighted to be part of the UNC restructuring this economy. We have to go and ask the various subsectors within the agricultural sector, the sheep farmers, the dairy farmers, the corn growers, the different aspect, vegetable growers, ask them what is it we as the government can do to help you all produce and become self-sufficient in Trinidad and Tobago. One question they that they have never considered. Let's say you go to the goat farmers and say, okay, guys, what do you need in terms of resources? That'll be land, machinery, infrastructure to produce enough meat to meet the needs of Trinidad and Tobago. We know demand. We know the demand because the demand is very simple to find out is what we import. We know that, right? So all we are saying, what resources your farmers need to get going and supply the demands for Trinidad and Tobago. So where we can be self-sufficient. Those are not difficult to research. Hopefully somebody within the UNC is doing that now. Go to the vegetable farmers and ask them what they need. So the other question now that this is where is that once you gather all the data, you have to ask, okay, at what price, what best price you can produce if you are given a secured market. If you are given a secured market, at what price can you produce it at? So therefore, once we get the answers, you will see maybe at a devaluation of 10 to 1, we can put all the goat farmers to supply the needs for Trinidad and Tobago. Let's say at 10 to 1 again. We can have all the dairy farmers now producing milk, butter, and cheese because their machinery now, you can manufacture those things on a smaller scale to meet the market. So those are the things we have to look at. But I've been seeing it has become quite standard practice to knock the PNM. Quite frankly, they're doing a good job of that themselves. What we need to do is to tell the people and give the people hope that look, we have the capacity to turn around Trinidad and Tobago. There will be some painful years, as Millie in Argentina did. Level with the people. We don't promise more than you could deliver because when they go in, they'll find an empty treasury. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You find an empty treasury and all the promises you made. I don't know if you have been following the events in the UK, Starmer, and they concocted a lot of promises on the elections, and now they can't deliver. They can't deliver, and the UK is becoming a poor country, a very poor country, given the level of homelessness and so on. When you look at the lives of the ordinary families in the UK, is not the same as before. So we have to avoid all of that. Do you know we import dehydrated sorrel from Egypt? Dehydrated sorrel from Egypt. And we have an overabundance of sorrel here. Do you know
You know,
Philippines?
I think I to honestly think that our people has been undermined for political and different prejudicial reasons. That this level of situation that we're dealing with that has suffocated those who are very capable of supplying us and growing our economy. I think there was deliberate discrimination there to restrain them and make things more complicated. There's not an ease of doing business under the PNM for the agricultural industry. I think we need to, um, we need to change that. Hoping that this UNC government can help us restructure things. We can focus on the farming industry because you have to prepare yourself for the world chaos that's about to take place or may take place. And if we don't focus on dealing with our agricultural structure, infrastructure, to prep ourselves. And I think you're saying the same thing to us that we need to focus and invest on that before we can go further with a lot of other things. But go ahead, Mr. Siram.
No, what you're saying is so true. What you're saying is so true. The question now is we can prepare the blueprint for it, and the next challenge is how to implement it. It's very simple. And that's why I'm saying the two variables that government could control is the negative list and the foreign exchange. And if you adjust those two things, everything else will fall in place. Now, we all agree that foreign exchange is scarce. We all agree. Now, in the 60s and 70s, when we were producing cars in Trinidad, within 3 years, you had to throw them away because they rusted. Right now, cars can last you 20 years easily. 20 years. We do not need more cars in Trinidad and Tobago. So we need a strong government to say, look, let's be like Singapore. Singapore only allows new cars to come in when you call an old one. So we always say, look, let's follow Singapore. Well, these are the things that we can do. We do not have we do not have the foreign exchange to import thousands of cars every year. We were there. I was at the bank in the 80s when I was looking at the auto industry. In 1982, we had an import of 23,000 cars. The next year, where the recession started, we had less than 5,000. So we have to make those adjustments. We have to make those adjustments. We cannot put these people in front of the queue for foreign exchange and starving the rest of the economy. The other, the other major point is the question of the banks and whether prudential guidelines. They are financing 100% for the cars. They are financing 100% for the homes, and there's no capital down payment required by citizens, and therein lies a very fragile arrangement, because if you have no skin in the game, no is that you're going to find, once the economy turns down, you're going to find a lot of repossessions of auto cars. It's already started, and a lot of repossession of homes. Is Trinidad and Tobago prepared for that? We are not. In fact, that is a global risk that is going to happen, because the banks continue, they go up and down. They're very relaxed with regards to lending. It hits the bottom. There are tremendous amount of foreclosures, and then guess who bails them out? Is the taxpayers bail them out. Unlike Iceland said, look, whichever banks want to fold has to fold up, let them fold up. I'm not going to support it. Unlike the rest of the world, they all get involved, and government get involved and say we have to bail them out. When you study the real cause for Crico's demise, it was a fraudulent transaction. They were taking in deposits without a bank license, and central bank allowed them to do it. So we have a lot of people. I put it this way: they have their bicycle license, but they're flying a 747, and that is our problem. And we say that's democracy. We have to look at democracy, our democratic, because we perpetually have what you call a government there with the minority, with a minority. We have to look at it differently. How do we appoint a CEO? How do we appoint a CEO? I'm asking a simple question. A lot of the people in government, would they be the head of a private sector institution? Probably not. But here it is, they're managing a 60 billion dollar enterprise. That's the projected revenues. But Gary, let
Well,
me let me
Mr. Seereeram, if you notice, they're not managing for the people; they are managing for themselves and their friends. And basically, I wouldn't say managing; they are mismanaging. And if you
That is true.
look at how things have been done in the country for the last 10 years, let's look at the last 10 years.
No, no, no. I
We don't
mean,
see, yeah, we don't see
I
government for the
agree.
people. We
I
don't see
agree.
government for
Listen,
the people. They refuse to
I
give accountability, right? You can ask
yep.
them nothing. A lot of arrogance and insults. So who are they working for? So this is the time in 2025 where we fire this government. But one of the things I would like to suggest, and I'm happy to have you here on board, is that if we deal with our infrastructure properly, we need to do a lot of how to say decentralization of things. Everything you shouldn't have to run to Port of Spain for everything. That's one of the things to deal with the congestion. The other thing is to really focus on building. When Mr. Input was talking about the rail, I told him, I said, instead of running it through these people's houses and break down the house that they already there, run it along the Gulf, come through the Carolina swamp and go straight into City Gate. You see, that made sense, right? But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to cause some discomfort for the people who support the UNC, basically. This
But
is a lot
but
of prejudicial thing. They
but
wasn't looking in.
Gary, you raise a very important point. Eh? I'll tell you what it is. In my view, when you study why people are going to Port of Spain, Port of Spain is a cost center. They produce nothing. All they do is change the ownership of assets, like the banks and so on. That's what they're doing in Port of Spain. So if you restructure the economy and you have productive sectors at different places within Trinidad and Tobago, you don't need all this traffic on the
Yeah,
road.
but I don't see government for people. See what I'm saying? Why you force a man from Rio Claro to get up 3 o'clock in the morning to go to Port of Spain for 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock appointment? These are the kind of things that we've been doing to our people, and they have to take 3 or 4 taxis to get there. I mean, so it's a small country, 100 by 50, 100 miles by 50, right? Basically, with billions of dollars spent in infrastructure, we don't see value for money nowhere. And we are putting this. We our people are still acting like they are subjected to the colonial master. The shadow is still over us. We don't have that strength. Some of us do. Some of us made a stand. But most of us, it's like we are so afraid to challenge anything. We don't realize we are citizens. We act like that we are indentured workers still and slaves. So when you take a chicken and you loosen the chicken wing, the chicken I realize is still free. Them days when they go buy the chicken and the chicken tie behind the wings, wrap around there. But we get our wings loose, and we still realize that. And then we are raised with this culture of don't say nothing because Eric Ulam back in the days you said the police to beat you. You know,
That is
uh,
that is true. It's still happening. It's still happening. But you see, at the end of the day, people have to be brave. Freedom is not given. You have to keep fighting for it all the time.
you have to realize your citizenship. You have
Yeah,
to
exactly,
realize, and we're
exactly.
not. The educational system has not really enforced that to encourage you.
Mhm.
They want you to be subjected. And
Subservient.
and,
That is
and
true.
what has this government? What have we seen? A government that act worse than the colonial masters. They take the position of the colonial masters, and we are operating in the Caribbean where we are still in the shadows of the colonial masters. We in the
But
Caribbean cannot come together in a united force at all. But go ahead.
No, no. What you're saying, and I've seen it in work. I work for two banks. One was a Canadian bank that followed the sort of British system, and then I work with Citibank, which was totally different. When I tell you totally different in
Well, I
terms of,
saw that article with Citibank, and maybe I would like you to elaborate a little bit on your experience there so people understand what we're dealing with.
yeah, it's a great bank in many ways, but they were so focused on profits that they were willfully blind to many of the fraudulent transactions. Many, and that is when I left. When I left, I saw they were still doing it, um, getting involved in transactions, skimming away from the treasury in one transaction, 70 million TT dollars. With regards to, so I'm saying, who is mining the store? We in the when I say we, Trinidadians in let's say the Ministry of Finance, they're not qualified. Even if they're qualified, they don't have the courage to stand up and tell these international banks where to get off. And I mean, it was
Exactly, exactly. My kind of words. Yes, go ahead. Well, you have need to tell them where to get off. But what I'm saying to you, what is lacking is that unity between with us in the Caribbean. We would betray each other for a few dollars, like a Judas in a minute from the colonial or the people. You know what I mean to say? Or say, for
that is
instance,
true.
with the U.S.
That is true. Now, if and there's so many books written about investment banks and their fraudulent practices and so on and all their tricks. If you haven't walked the street, you cannot be Minister of Finance, because they will take advantage with you. They'll carry you in the bright lights, put you on, go to the best restaurants in New York and so on, and you feel so accomplished. You come back here as if you're walking on water, not knowing that they have robbed you left, right, and center. So this is where we fall short. I'll tell you. Um, I did my MBA at Western in Canada. So I interacted with these guys. Um, I'll be very frank to tell you, my experience with Citibank was excellent. Was excellent. Tremendous amount of learning, and I did a lot of new financial products that they put me on a special team in Latin America to develop financial products. I was the first one in Trinidad to do an interest rate swap. I think since that may be the first and last one done locally, because the local banks are very unproductive. They're making money easy, just borrowing at less than 1% and lending at 10%, 12%. I mean, so there's a tremendous amount of inertia and laziness among the banks. Um, but they were very exciting times for me. But this is where the problem lies: is that even if you're going to the best universities, Harvard, etc., but you don't have the confidence to face these guys and tell them, look, back off, just back off. That is not correct. When they scammed, when they scammed Petrotrin, plus NGC plus Trintoma on that particular deal, which I'm writing about because it's a tremendous learning experience for people who are not familiar with the goings on in the bank. They lied to all these people. They created fictitious emails and all of that, and bullied Petrotrin in submission, bullied them. And Petrotrin,
Do you think that possible that there were some people, how to say, getting some kickbacks from that extra increase of interest that the banks was
the
charging? That
cost,
there were some people.
um, well, the kickbacks could be very subtle, not necessarily money. I never saw Citibank passing money. Um, but but they could be in terms of treatment, in terms of visit to New York or something like that. But I didn't see that. It was a clear case of
Of the
taking
banks,
advantage.
right?
And there was a saying at the time: you have to occupy the space in customers' mind. So they're so dependent on you. They'll do anything. They'll
The
do
wine and
anything.
dine the customer, of course. Yeah,
Oh
yeah. I
yeah,
was
all kinds of
in the
things.
sales
Yeah,
business. So I have a little idea of that. But what
yeah.
I'm
They'll.
looking for,
Mhm.
Mr. Sira, is
Yes.
that the we need to come together a little more strongly in the Caribbean, the Caribbean in general, where we can have a greater strength in fighting for each other, whether it's in trade, economics, or developing things. You know, because I mean, islands by itself cannot really stand up to the big countries like the U.S. and England and Europe. Why is the European Union dictated to us? Why isn't there a Caribbean or CARICOM Union dictating some terms and conditions? You know what I mean? So these are the
Okay.
kind of things
So
I want to
right.
see.
Let me. I'll give you two examples they can work on very quickly. Right. One is, there are hurricanes in the Caribbean every now and then. They break down all the infrastructure, all the telephone poles and electrical poles and so on. So we can, in the Caribbean, we can develop a common technical capacity, and therefore store within perhaps a safer country such as Trinidad. We can store the raw materials that can be quickly sourced and put back the country back in a working condition. We can do that. Secondly, we can look at joining for insurance. We can look at joining, negotiating for insurance. That's a third. But let me ask this question: do each of these little countries, including Anguilla and so on, do they need to have a commission ambassador in every country? We don't. We don't. So we have to learn to cut costs in many ways, and utilize, coordinate, and make CARICOM a meaningful institution. Make it a meaningful institution. Do we have to
I,
have
I think we
it?
definitely need it because every time we need it, we need to strengthen CARICOM at this stage in the game of things.
Now, I had given a presentation to the ministers in Eastern Caribbean, explaining to them all these fraudulent transactions. And since then, the banks never tried their tricks again. Since then, that was a whole morning at the central bank in St. Kitts. I explained to them the transactions and so on. I even did 2 day seminar for Federal Reserve Bank, explaining to them all these repos and what happens what happens in the street. Now, many of these regulators, they have never walked the street. They don't know. They don't know. If you are regulating and you don't know, then you're a failed regulator. And that particular session, we with Federal Reserve Bank, I explained to them the whole nature of the repo. The repo is itself is a farce. For you to have a repo, you must have a sale. Sale never consummated, so therefore the repos are redundant. They still have that problem in Trinidad. So they're creating what you call, they say, innovative products, and there's no innovation.
Well,
These
Mr. Pandey
innovation,
used to say that we're so educated that we don't produce nothing. That's one of the things that
exactly
he
the
mentioned. Right,
exactly
and
the point.
I cannot understand. I mean, why do we have to? I mean, we might be lacking a little resources, but our we have so many doctors graduating, and yet we have to go look for an expert outside the country. Why is that? Why do we have to fly somebody to New York or some other country when we have the brightest people in the world? We have some of the brightest people in the world in Trinidad and Tobago. They go to the U.S. and they are very well appreciated overseas, in, as you know, in foreign countries with their knowledge, and they are taken further in, to expand their skills and things like that. But I don't see that transition to Trinidad, to where we get that level of expertise, you know.
No, we have a lot of educated persons, well, highly trained professionals in Trinidad, highly trained. But there's an old story about the pizza effect. The pizza in Italy was a poor man's food. It went to America and got respectability and came back to Italy as a highly desirable item. So
Right, right.
so these things are natural, but the point I want to make is that whilst a lot of educated Trinidadians, they probably don't have the confidence to stand up on the international and and speak their minds, speak their mind, be fearless in expressing yourself, and that's a big difference between an English educated system and an American system. American system, I told you, I work with Citibank and with the guys in New York and so on. There was one very interesting episode where after the meeting, a junior staff was telling his seniors, he said, you know, you should not have done this and you should not have done that. Do you think that could ever happen in Trinidad?
Yeah, I hear you. That is the we are still under that colonial shadow, cultural
It's a
shadow.
mental, yes, it's a
Yeah,
mental.
and even though we're educated and we're independent, we're not really independent in our minds, and we need some kind of leadership on the ground to help break loose that. You know what I mean? In Trinidad, we need that kind of leadership there, and I know that there's still that PNM enforcement there. You know that they would use the police to brutalize you if you or do something there to to jeopardize your family or target your family and stuff like that. But if
Yeah,
we are united, we can do that. There has to be a coming together. But I have seen a level of disunity. You know, when we were poorer, we were more together culturally and in other ways. But now there's too much of a distance. You know, everybody's on their
yeah,
own, even with, things like that. You know.
yeah. Gary, I call it mortgageitis. Mortgageitis. Once you have children at school, you have bills to pay, you have there's every year you want to go on holidays and so on. You weaken yourself. You weaken yourself because you believe you have a lot to lose, and therefore you're fearful. You will talk among yourselves. You'll criticize and you're very articulate, but to go in the open and deal with it, it's a very it's something that you're not going to see in a middle class society. You're not going to see it. There's
No.
some there's some that
Yeah. Yeah.
will
Go ahead.
there's some that will put themselves out. I mean, I have been brutalized by the institutions because of the things I've taken up. Sometimes the ordinary citizens don't even appreciate it, the amount of work that I've done. But that's part of it. You do it because you feel one you know you can do it, and you do the work, and don't worry with the outcome. You do the work. And a lot of people are very skeptical to deal with me given my extent of knowledge on these matters. I have been on chat groups and challenging them about all these economic matrices that are useless. GDP is a useless number. Everybody, once they have a little knowledge of what of GDP, they figure they know economics. Once you know what is the interest rate, you figure you know finance. But all those things are very specialized. So in the group, I challenged them. I said, tell me exactly what's the purpose of debt to GDP ratio." They don't know. They don't know. And these are very well educated persons. They don't know. It is useless. I've worked in the banks. When you borrow money, you look at cash flows. Do you have the cash flows to pay back? And that's how you analyze capacity to repay. But this is where you have cutting edge to advanced knowledge is a cutting edge, and that's the area I would prefer be. I just don't want to look at a textbook and figure I know everything on economics or finance or anything. You have to be questioning all those and practices, theories and practices. You know.
Right. So
So
now we are facing a situation here where we see U.S. aid is being pulled away from a lot of countries, and we have some challenges in Trinidad and Tobago where we have to look out for TNT. And to focus on building our economic strength. Feeding our people must be high priority with any government. And I mean, I know our UNC government, Mrs. Bisesa, has all intentions of dealing with these issues. You mentioned the agriculture thing. I know a lot of us have been making suggestions because she had opened the door for making suggestions towards the manifesto. Dr.
Mhm.
Gopi Singh, which I'm sure you know very well, has been leading that up, and I've been in touch with him. I'm not sure if you're in touch with him also, but
No, I offered my services. He asked me for a few points, which I gave. I would have liked to see it before it's finalized, so I can, critique it
yeah,
and
well,
make
you could
suggestions.
speak to Dr. Gopi Singh on that, reference to
Yeah,
that.
well, I spoke to him already. I don't want to push myself further.
Yeah, yeah, I know. No, I'm just
You
saying.
know?
No, I know. A lot of us have been making suggestions. So yes, we have to look at of reinforcing our economic strength. But definitely, if we boost our agricultural production, deal with the infrastructure, deal with the issues of the water how to say conservation, right? We need to deal with that infrastructure where the heavy rainfall come and all the water going to the sea. We're not restoring that water for the dry season to assist the farmers. We saw with the PNM where they wanted to lock up the farmer for taking water from the river, like it's Wasa water. The water in the
Yes,
river
yes.
run out there. So if the farmer use that water to water the plants, and the plants running back right back into the water not running back right back in the river next to it.
That is true. It goes underground as well.
Yeah,
But
right.
I hoping. Um, let's assume that they have a good chance of winning the election. I'm glad that they joining up with some forces because every straw counts. Put it that way. Every straw
Yes.
counts. You can't underestimate, never underestimate the opposition. Um, and I'm saying to get back into power is then the heavy lifting starts. You have to say, look, what did I promise and can I deliver? But I have a plan to excite people, excite people. You have to excite people, excite different subsectors. And we have several interest groups. Look, the racing fraternity. Sometimes they just want a piece of land. You don't have to put money into it. Sometimes you just want a change in legislation. So you have to deep dive now. Don't wait until you get into power. Deep dive now and start talking to all these interest groups because you
I
need
know
their
they've been
votes.
doing some. I can't say how much because a lot of the information are privileged, but I know they've been doing that.
Okay,
They're members of the Agricultural Society who has been involved in conversating with them.
okay. So well, I'm just saying once you deep dive now, so that when you do and get into government, um, you
You want to
begin
be able to hit the ground running.
implementation.
I like to, yeah, we want to be able to hit the ground running. And
Hit the
definitely,
ground.
I'm sure you will be consulted. You're a well recognized person, you've been around. So I'm sure they're going to be reaching out to you for your recommendation and stuff like that. But what I want to utilize this channel to do is to give you every opportunity and airtime you need for when you have something to say that you could come forward and not only write about it, but you could come visually and address and educate the people, our people, whether inside or outside the country, that they can see this information because we want to try and give as much information and education to our people so they know what we are about going forward and what they can expect from us and what we're looking to do. And I'm also looking to bring on board our people that's outside the country to come
Yes,
on board with
yes,
us.
yes.
I mean, we have globally. This UNC USA is a global effort. It's a global platform. If we know in the United States, I have people in Canada on board with us, and other people from the UK and stuff like that joins on board with us. So I want to give you all the time you need, airtime here, so that you could address any issues or educate us on anything that you have to say going forward.
Yeah. What will be useful? I'll send you my weekly articles. I just wrote an article. They started off this charade again to sell the refinery. Now the first round was a mishap. It was it. I wrote about it then. I said nothing will come out of it, and so said, so done. And so I just recap what were the flaws in the first rounds. Now they said they putting a team together. So I would love to take questions and and discuss these things because at the end of the day, uh, I wouldn't like to just be saying something not being challenged. I'd love to be challenged because I could change my mind if I'm wrong.
Well,
But
I have a friend with me here that's on the program too. He's one of my co-hosts. Trini, this is it up your avenue with the refinery being in the field there. Can you jump in here a little bit? I'm not sure he's saying this. Okay, maybe he
Good night,
lost the line.
gentlemen.
yeah,
Go
good
ahead.
night.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I joined the program kind of late because I had another function that I was attending, so I'm kind of lost with the discussion and how you all going about the discussion. But you said something very interesting there a little while ago, Mr. Seereeram, about the refinery and why it was that first bid with I'm guessing you're speaking about patriotic.
Yes.
Yeah,
And there were 70 institutions showed interest.
seven
Then
zero.
five, 70, yes. And then five were shortlisted. And out
Right.
of those five, three submitted bids.
Could you elaborate on that, please, so that
Okay. They put out invitation internationally for people to either lease the refinery or buy out the refinery, right? They got 70.
let me stop you. Can they sell the refinery first to begin? Because as far as I'm aware, that refinery is there's a hold at a New York bank for that 850 and that 750. I don't know how much US thousand.
Right.
So
My my
they can't sell.
good question. No, good question. My understanding was that government gave a guarantee to replace any mortgages or anything, any liens. So government has guaranteed those loans.
Yeah, but the government is not in a position to do that.
Or they yeah, you're right. You're right. If you look at their finances and look at that, but the bank said, look, I prefer your guarantee. I could always squeeze your neck one way or the next. I don't care for physical security in Trinidad.
Yeah, and as far as we are aware, those two big huge loans for WGTL and the liquids to gas, those loans were kicked down the road for another 10 years, so they would be due in 2028, and I believe the interest rates for those are at as high as 9% or 9.5% or something like that. So we are looking at basically doubling what
Well,
we're, we're,
well,
we're due.
right. So what I would recommend, and this has to come back, um, is that they have to look at a commission of inquiry or some review on the decision to close down the refinery. I used to manage the Petrotrin when I was at the banks, and I don't recall them being being in financial problems, unable to pay their debt, except when the the liquid the gas to liquid plant came about and additional loans were put on the balance sheet. But closing down the refinery did not make sense because those debts were not forgiven. They were just transferred to government books. So they could have transferred it to government books and keep the refinery afloat.
Correct.
So, so all these things have to be reviewed, and a commission of inquiry to get to the bottom of it is that how did they make that decision to close it down? You see, you cannot. There's a fiduciary duty by government and anybody managing other people's assets is that you must have a procedure in place, a procedure that can stand the scrutiny of anyone in the world, that this makes sense. If they follow those procedures, assuming they were approved and they followed it, then in safe waters. However, if they didn't have any procedures and they just went along, just by guess or by some other design, then that is a criminal offense.
Well,
You
as
cannot
far
do that. There is a fiduciary breach of fiduciary. So that is where I'm sure the lawyers, I could talk to them. I've put together many cases dealing with international senior counsels and so on, put together cases Those are the things that whether you want to promise it on the platform or not is a different matter. But it has to be done. A commission of inquiry has to be done as to why this company was closed down. Now, people don't know when the employees, the senior employees, were given a real golden handshake to take that closure. That let's say you were one year again to you worked at Petrotrin, if I may ask.
No, no, no. My dad worked at Petrotrin
Your
for many.
dad, right? So your dad would have gotten, let's say he has one year again for retirement,
Well,
right?
actually, he retired. He retired long before the Petrotrin.
Long before Lord. But you could, yeah, this is worthy of research. That's why they closed their eyes and just took the money, Because let's say you have one year to retire. You were paid for the number of years, that is severance payment.
Mm-hmm.
The number of years you work, you were paid off, although you just had one year again to retire. You should have just been paid for that one remaining year instead of over 30 years. So they got a hefty payout. That's why the unions didn't object to anything. Roger and they asked them, they probably walked away with several $1 million. So they told government, take the refinery, do what you want with it. And that was it. The junior employees, those are the ones who got hit badly because they don't know where to go after. But
Correct.
when you get lump sum of payment like that, money finishes very fast.
Yeah, yeah,
Money
yeah.
finishes very fast. Particularly, let's say you're middle aged and you can't find a job outside because the job market is very tight. So now I think those employees would be feeling the pinch because they were spent out the massive lump sum and they're in problems now to get an equivalent job.
Correct.
But Rosie and they would have walked away a tremendous amount of money, and that's why they closed their eyes and took it.
Mm-hmm. Now we've detracted a little bit from what I wanted
Yeah,
to
sure. Sorry.
continue. That's the refinery lease to Patriotic. What stymied that whole process? That's a bit confusing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Listen, good question. I covered it in my article that will be published on Tuesday. I'll send it to you guys. Very simple. You invited international bidders. 70 of them showed interest. At the end of the day, I don't know if they went to do the due diligence. They had to pay for that. But only five were shortlisted. Out of those five, only three bidders. Two international bidders who probably were operating refineries before or knowledgeable about the industry. And OWTO said, I also want to buy. The two previous bidders, the two other bidders, one of them said, look, give me the refinery, I'll spend money on it, and if I make money, I will pay you a percentage of the profit. That was the deal. The second one said, I will pay you so much money over 15 years, and that will amount to $7 million, 7 million US dollars, 7 million. So you had one at zero, you had one at 7 million, and these guys out of the blue said, 700 million US dollars, I will pay for it. Let me ask a question. This is procedure. When you are shortlisting persons, you ask for the financial statements. Otherwise, any vagaries could tell you, I'll pay $1 billion for it. You ask for the financial statements. Am I right or wrong?
Correct.
You must ask for it. So all of this thing now, if somebody offer you now 0, 7, and 700, you'll say, boss, bring the check immediately. 700, take it, take it, take it, bring the check immediately. Or you'll be very suspicious of this. Is this drug money they're trying to launder? You're very suspicious. This don't make sense. It did not make commercial sense, and that's why it fell apart. Because they start negotiating. So the whole country now saying, my God, we're going to retain ownership and within and for employees and all the rigmarole that goes with that, right? National and so on. So the whole country now entertain this foolishness. I wrote at the time that nothing is going to happen. It doesn't make sense. 700 million. You know how much money government would have spent, and even OWTO. Government said, okay, show me your business plan. If you are selling an item, right, you want to ask the buyer, potential buyer, for a business plan. If I, the vendor, have to approve a business plan, why? It means to say that I could approve it, yeah, I'll approve it. It means to say I'm wrapped up now in the risk of that operation because I approved it. So if the buyer now can't make any money within 6 months, 12 months, he can't pay back debt or can't pay anything, he will come to the government and say, boys, look, you guys approved this plan. So you are part of the foolishness as well. You
Yeah.
don't do those things like that. And I'm wondering why was it entertained for so long in Trinidad and Tobago? So now they're coming out now and offering the refinery for sale. So I've asked the question, what has changed in the international market? Now, what has changed has really devalued the value of the refinery because two things have changed. One is the electric vehicles are becoming more popular. Whether it will continue or not, that's a different matter. But that has changed. The second point, I don't know if you all have followed, but in oh gosh, that African country, the guy has developed a vehicle, Zimbabwe. The guy has developed a vehicle that takes radio waves and converts it into energy to drive the car. Now, whether that is a fluke, whether it's a farce, it is still left to be seen. But he has the car as of last week. I think he has the car for sale. Now, that's a game changer. That's a game changer. So, where does a refinery fit into it?
Well, um, we can't look that far ahead because technology like that, if it exists, is a long way off from getting to where it can be competitive
Agreed.
in the existing market. That is why the electric vehicles took almost 20 years to get to where it is today. Even nat-
Agreed.
even natural gas.
Agreed.
So there is still, and the automakers and so on, and the petroleum dealers and so on will not allow, we can't change our infrastructure and our system from the traditional automobile just like that in 30 years or in 20 years. Not even 20 years from now, we will still be stuck with cars running on petroleum, on base products.
No, no,
So,
I'm not saying no. All I'm saying is, has the refinery capacity in the world has it degenerated to such an extent that it will allow a new refinery to come up? That's the point I'm making. What has
okay,
really changed? I didn't see any change from a few years ago to now. But I mean, the saga continues, and we could entertain ourselves. I was suggesting they could have started it after Carnival, so we could enjoy the Carnival and then look forward to something else. But the point I'm making, the foolishness in all of this is costing the taxpayers a lot of money and wastage, wastage, because they would have hired a lot of high-powered accounting firms and so on to look at
so
feasibility
on.
studies and so on.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I personally believe it's a farce, another election farce, because if they only start talking about the refinery, we've been asking what is happening with the refinery for every budget, and the prime minister got up in the last budget and say the refinery is not part of the budget. So it's a big election farce because we only hear about the refinery when it comes to elections.
Yes, yes, that is true. But how I look at it, let's say a new government comes in place, we should be looking at what are our raw materials. I mentioned that to Gary. What are our raw materials, and crude oil is one of it. So our demand is about probably 20 to 30,000 barrels a day. Our capacity for crude oil is about 40, and probably hovering about 45,000 barrels a day. So we could set up a refinery here on a much smaller scale rather than using. We could use some of the machinery, some of the equipment, and so on. What is salvageable, but once you leave machinery unattended,
Mm-hmm.
it loses value significantly, right? So we could try and salvage what we could and set up a refinery for 40-50 thousand barrels a day, and we'll save because we are importing refined products now. We are importing. We need US dollars. We need US dollars.
Correct.
So, if we can, my view is to immunize ourselves from international vagaries. The Panama
Correct.
Canal, that takes about 5% of international trade, 40% for US trade. We don't know what could happen in other shipping areas. So we should immunize ourselves as a matter of urgency from international volatility in terms of supply, in terms of shipping, etc. We should
Well,
do it.
the PNM government was never along those guidelines, because they wouldn't have closed the sugar factories to start with, and so on. So they weren't thinking that far ahead.
No, but this is where you have to differentiate yourself.
But
UNP
you
have
have to remember again, right? All these things were done. Remember, the people that was in this industry would finance the opposition. So you didn't want the opposition supporters getting too rich. You understand?
yeah
They would have the money. So there all these different kind of strategy. They wasn't thinking about country. They didn't want the
no
king cutters to become economically wealthy. You know what I'm saying? So the man who planted the rice, you didn't want him to become wealthy because he financed the opposition. So I mean, so these are some of the discriminatory things that they kill
right
the country.
so
What I'm saying,
right
go ahead. So the point that I like to reiterate is a few things we have to work on beside the oil industry. We have to um, build up our agricultural sector and mass produce the food. We have to work on our tourism to bring money in that way. We have as much as we can where we reduce the importation of things that we can grow in Trinidad. These are the things we need to work on because we're going to need it forex for other things. So if we
Mhm.
could focus on, we have to do more exporting because we have not really done a good job with uh, branding or exporting our brand overseas international. We need to push that more where we focus on getting our products not only to match, produce, and feed our people, bring down the cost of living, but also to export. We have to work harder on all those other goods beside the oil refinery. So these are the things also, but go ahead, gentlemen, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you, but let's look at the low hanging fruits. Import substitution must be a priority. Food security has to be a priority. Now, recycling, I'll show you some of the, I would say, very profitable investments. Do you know that the value of a tire, 70% of it is in the casing? So recycling is important, and there are technology now where you have recap tires equivalent to the new tires. So we can do all of that. We throw away our tires, we throw away the casing. So those are the things that we should look at and where the opportunities lie. So I think let's say small manufacturing. There are many things we can do with regard to small scale manufacturing. One of the problems Trinidad has is that we always want the best in the world, the biggest in the world. And I am saying no. There are lots of small manufacturing opportunities that we can do to put people micro industries that we could follow what's happening in India, follow what's happening in China, following around the world. The Asian countries and African countries are very good at it. So don't reinvent the wheel. We can just research around the world and see what are the things we can do here. Now in Guyana, they're planting apples and they're planting grapes. Why can't we also do it even on a small scale? Potatoes, I have mentioned before, we're on the same latitude like Burkina Faso. I mean, they're producing millions of tons of potatoes. So, lots of things we can do. We can research it, make the Ministry of Agriculture put together about 10 new things for the year. Let them work. Let them work and tell us 10 new things that we can start planting and try it out on an experimental basis and then expand it. I had mentioned in the last, I plant a lot of things. I'm not an agriculturist, believe me. But in terms of sandalwood, when I researched sandalwood in India, it is so precious that you have to get government approval to cut even if the sandalwood is in your backyard, right? Australia took up the challenge, and farmers there are planting thousands of acres in sandalwood. There are two types of sandalwood, the redwood as well as the whitewood, the chandan that we know, the one that has the aroma. So why can't we tell the Ministry of Agriculture, go and plant 2 acres this year and let's see how it comes. I've planted a few. It's difficult to get seeds for the white one. But I'm saying there's so many things we can do. Mahogany can flourish in the abandoned cane lands, mahogany. So I think there's so much to be done. We should be manufacturing our own furnitures and so on, not relying on courts to import.
Yeah, there isn't the political will to do something like that, because the government and the financiers were never interested in agriculture, because most of their finances were hinged on the import export business, bring into the country and sell. That is why they trust in agriculture.
Right.
Even
So okay.
e-
So we have to look and learn. We have to look and learn. Suppose we decide let's drain the swamp, drain the swamp. We know these things are difficult, but there are two things I was saying the government can do without approval by anybody in particular. One is adjust the exchange rate to something more realistic and put out a list of negative list of items
negative list,
that
like
we
we can.
can't import.
Correct.
Just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, well,
What we have to say, forget this thing about Indians or Africans, nation first. Nation first. So I think, look, let's look at what is being done in other countries, learn from it, be brave, be very brave, and go and take a stand. And when you go to the people, you will see the kind of acceptance. You will break the racial barriers, you'll break the class barriers, everything by being firm. What people want is firmness and a clear direction how to get Trinidad out of this morass that we are in, how to get rid of it. For example, the wastage in government, and this is where I'm just throwing this on the table because it's a very important. Do not promise on this election what you cannot deliver, because you cannot be in opposition in 10 years and do not know the true state of affairs in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, you have to chart that. You have to chart that as at now. What is the state of affairs and what are the things you ought to be doing going forward? And that's what Millet did in and his approval rating in Argentina. And despite all the hardship that he has imposed, things are starting to turn around in Argentina. But I agree with you. There'll always be that group who will be looking to frustrate your efforts and undermine it and so on. You have to be prepared for it. You cannot enter a fight expecting not to be hit. You cannot.
hmm
You expect it, but you prepare for it. You prepare for it and go back to the people at all times and tell the people these are the things. Keep the people informed. Nobody in Trinidad, except perhaps myself and Roger Hussein, who is telling this country we're in a dire strait. You all are familiar with Roger Hussein, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's telling this country we're in a dire strait? I made this declaration since 2015. Since 2015, I gave the Minister of Finance at the time, Larry Hawaii, about 30 items. I said, Larry, take the bull by the horn. Take the bull by the horn and start dealing with it. You have to level with the people. You have to level. Do not assume that the people are so stupid they can't understand simple things. They know if you don't have money, you don't have money. What is our state of of our foreign exchange holdings? What is our, that should be published. It should be published on a weekly basis. Central bank and government, they are hiding all these figures. What is the level of debt? What is the level of debt? And coming to a very important variable, ratio, debt to GDP. GDP belongs to the whole, they say that is the production of the whole country. Why not put the debt of the whole country on the production of the whole country? They don't do it. The debt now, that is bank debt. That is not payables. That does not include all the payables that they're still owing cane farmers money. They have to include it in debt.
Correct.
A simple definition of debt is what you owe people, what you owe people,
Or what the other state enterprises dictate.
what they owe, right? So, but
Well,
you
I have a question
consolidate.
as you mentioned that with the cane farmers. Didn't the European Union release some money towards the cane farmers that the government was in possession of? That I'm not sure that money was given out
Yeah,
to the people.
they released some, and the UNC government gave out a portion of it with the promise that if they get back into government, they'll pay the others in tranches. But I wouldn't discuss that strategy. But cane farmers are not being paid, and I would like UNC to make that as a major issue, that at least the cane farmers will get what is due. Because when a lawyer is engaged by government, he gets advance payments, and here a real debt is outstanding, so they must service the debt to cane farmers. But coming back to the definition of debt, they exclude about $5 billion that they owe on VAT.
Correct.
They probably exclude another $2-3 billion or maybe more that they owed contractors and suppliers and so on. So
State
this debt,
enterprises. What's
so this
that?
debt, and I've been challenging the economists on this matter. How do you define debt? Very simple. When you go to the bank asks you what's your liabilities. You have to list out everything, even what you owe your parents or what you owe. That's liabilities. Do you know that our government do not prepare a balance sheet? Since 2007, the government of Barbados, they present a balance sheet. They present a balance sheet. So we are managing a country without proper data, without proper data. How is that possible? I understand that there are certain states in America. Every time the state government spend money, it's registered there for everyone to see. For everyone to see. Things are hidden. You saw, you saw where was it the accountant, the accounting general or whatever. 2 point some billion dollars were missing. Is that a joke? Is that a joke? Somebody has to account for it. If you don't get your maths right, let me make another point with regards to the budget. And this is a chronic problem that people do not understand. When government present the budget, they tell you this is my revenues I expect from the oil sector, from taxes, etc. They tell you that, right? They also say my expenditure, this is my expected expenditure, net of net of capital repayment. Now, what they're preparing, and the accountants among us will know, they are preparing a cash flow budget, a source and use of cash. Source and use of cash. So in your expenditure, it's an outflow, it's not a real expenditure. It does not capture depreciation and so on. But you must put into that expenditure how much you expect to pay back on loans, your loan payments. And that amounts to about five billion every year. That is why every year, they run a deficit on the accounts, and they come back to borrow more money every year, year after year after year. And that's a big problem with us. It means to say that if you are understating your expenditure, so I hope all these things can be cleaned up with a fresh government, and let's tell the people the real state of affairs. So the deficits are not 5 billion as they're showing, it's more like $11 billion. How are they going to fund it? They can't fund it. So our total debt keeps growing and growing and growing. And we're reaching a state where we cannot even service interest payment. And therein lies a big problem. If you have to borrow to pay interest, you're generally called a ghost enterprise, a ghost enterprise. So, I think as the nation, and we as perhaps maybe a little more educated, should really try to find out what is the true state of affairs in Trinidad and Tobago, because you cannot manage any business without having accurate data. You can't, because you have to lie, and the only way to cover up a lie is with another lie. I don't see, I don't see in that string of events the where truth fits in. Truth doesn't fit in.
No, you're very
We
correct
see
in
that
that.
we saw that with the Auditor General, and the thing going all the way to the Privy Council and saying why you're not investigating the minister instead of the her.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, I I I, I think any citizen could bring that charge. That's a serious charge, very very serious charge. You miss allocating two
So
point some billion dollars.
we want to engage the population in the real conversation, in the real issues, and not be distracted by government propaganda. So I want to keep this kind of conversation going. Go ahead.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the question of dissemination of information. It might be it might be a little surprising, that it's not conventional way of thinking of things, but you need to advance knowledge. You advance knowledge by taking risks and by saying things that are not conventional. You know, truth. They say truth goes through three phases. Truth goes through the phase where everybody laugh at you, and they say then it goes through another phase where everybody is angry with you, and then the third phase is accepted by everybody and not recognizing the source of truth. So you have to stick to it. You can't give up. If someone ridicule truth, you cannot just crawl back into your hole. Then nothing changes. Nothing changes in the world.
Trini, you have any other questions?
No, no. Actually, we have been here for quite a while, and although I missed a good portion of it, it would have, sure, it would have been more interesting discussion. I don't know if
Right, right.
Wade has anything
Um,
to add, and
No,
Mr.
well, let's
Sriram, you
see.
want to add anything to us?
No, no. I think I've covered a lot with regards to diversification and so on. I'm looking at a very exciting. Um, the let the politicians, they have their egos. I mean, nobody lives without some level of ego. They let them be humble and listen to people, see if it makes sense, test it, discuss it, and sift out now a very good program for Trinidad and Tobago in the nation's interest. It's not for any segregated groups or anything like that. In the nation's interest, nation first, country first. And I think it's a great opportunity if the UNC get back into power to look at it that way, and don't look at it that you're getting into the politics for enriching yourselves. Don't look at it that way. Now, one of the problems are with politicians, and this is not UNC, PNM, or politicians around the world. Many of them are not mature, but they're put into a position of great power, and they don't have the maturity to handle it. And there's no magic cure for it, but it's to be cognizant of that fact. Because when you are in a position of power, even your thought, even your thought, people will interpret that and act out. Because our culture is that you like to please your boss. So one major uh, recognition we should have is that the prime minister in our system is given too much powers, too much power. So they'll go away and they might look at a deal and say, okay, let's close it. They should be mature enough to say, okay, we'll consider it. I'll send it to my technical people to look at it. Technical people. Because without that advice, you often fall into wrong. You remember the Prime Minister and Stuart Young went to Texas and closed a deal.
Mm-hmm.
You all remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we
yeah.
also know they went and buy two Coast Guard boats, and
Two
we
Coast
saw the
Guard
deal with
boats.
that too. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is, they overrided their powers. They don't have the power to do that because the procedure requires you, whether written or
Checks and
not
balance, but
written.
this
That is correct. So they have to learn. When you go, you could look, talk about it, but do not make a decision until all the facts are given to the technical people within the ministry and even outside the ministry to get final advice how to go forward. But many of us, we 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 like to show what powers we have, and then when we make a decision and say buy it, we tell our technical guys, look, just justify it, justify it. So they
Yeah.
fudge some sort of things, and that is where opposition is very, very important as well, because they must insist what is your policy with regards to purchase of the boats. Show me your policy. You don't have a policy, and you're spending millions of dollars. You don't have a policy. You don't have a procedure. Who are the technical advisors? Let me see their credentials. So I'm saying we need to establish and so these sort of things that there's full transparency and professionalism, because politicians have the power of committing the country to things way beyond their authority, way beyond their authority. It's just to be mindful of those things, and that's where an a mature and well-rounded, experienced leader could could advise their team as to what to do or not to do. Because whatever decision you make, I've been on board, so I am on board, is that whatever decision you make 10 years down the road, somebody should be able to examine it and say, okay, there was a good reason for making that decision, whether yes or no. Corporate governance also applies to government. And I think this is where you all having influence on these things um, is very, very important.
well, we decided we're going to assume our citizenship and raise our voices. We're not going to
Yes.
be, indentured slaves, or, what I'm saying to you, our workers. We're going to raise our voices as much as possible we can, and we've been doing that as the best as we can. And we want to invite others to come on board and raise their voices on this platform, also to help educate, bring the right information forward, bring your suggestions, things like that, So, we deeply appreciate you taking the time to join us and educating us.
Well, I'm delighted that you invited me, Gary, and I hope I've been helpful. I think let the government, let the UNC, if they form the government, hopefully they do. You don't get the best. You also get some of the negatives as well. But at the end of the day, we have to decide which is the better team for for the country at this point in time. And hopefully, they, there's no question that the UNC has been more responsive to public public opinions and public, pressure even, which is a good thing. It means to say that's part of democracy. But to put Trinidad on a very good path. For example, one of the first thing I would do is to reduce the pension for prime ministers and so on, because you cannot. That is not cast in stone. 79,000 a month. Are these guys, they paying themselves? You know what this ends up to be?
But telling citizens at the same time to tighten their belt. They cut everybody, they strangle everybody. From the time this government came into office, everybody's money was delayed, or they can't get it. Even I remember the guys who taking the children to school through the Ministry of Education, the little maxi taxi drivers, they had trouble getting
Yeah, yeah,
paid.
yeah,
You know,
that is true. Uh, as far as I'm concerned, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. and that is an abuse of power. So all those things can be couched in legal terms and examine whether a case can be brought against. You can't do that. Put it this way. Do you know in company law, if you know you cannot pay, then you should close down the company, you know. It means to say you're insolvent. By government not paying means to say government can't make these payments. However, they're making payments for other things at their discretion. You can't do that. You can't owe somebody $5 million in $1 billion in refund and not pay them. You can't do that. And then other persons jumping the line and getting payment immediately, or they're getting prepayment like some of these lawyers. Can somebody answer how much money is being paid on legal fees? And at what is the aging of those payables? What is the aging of it? You know, so all these things, I think it's a breach of duty. It's a breach of fiduciary duty. But simple company law, you cannot operate an enterprise knowing that you cannot pay. That is basic. So you
Very
know,
true.
a good team of lawyers could look at all these nuances and see. Look, let me. It's cruel. It's cruel. I tell you, it's cruel. You wouldn't give cane farmers a little bit of money that you got from European Union. You wouldn't give them after 10 years. You wouldn't give them. You're just hoping they die. You wouldn't distribute the land, 2 acres for the cane farmers. You can't be so incompetent. You cannot take. You cannot take a position with false pretense. In other words, you're taking a position as a CEO of the country. You cannot take that and not fulfill your mandate. Not fulfill your mandate. I don't know if you remember, but they all swear to the Constitution. All swear to the Constitution when they became ministers, when they became members of Parliament. So what does the Constitution say? Don't pay the people when due. You must be fair. You must be
Well, them,
fair.
them, them became, Dr. Raleigh became king, and you can ask him no more questions. In fact, for the first year in government, they wasn't really answering too many questions what they do it. And all of a
Right. So
sudden,
so
all the money left in the treasury there, all the money left in the HSF fund was drained, and up to now they can't give proper explanation about it. They,
right.
we've seen all of that.
So we need to enact laws. If you cannot answer a question within 30 days or whatever time period, that's a strike against you in Parliament. If there are 3 strikes, then you're out of Parliament. Put that up for discussion, but put it to the people, you know.
No, but
Put
in
it
order
to
to
the
do things
people.
like that, in order to do things like that, we have to have constitutional reform. Since 2015,
No, well,
we
I
we can't have make laws like that. That we have to have constitutional reform before we call to account like that.
but I'm saying written into the Constitution, these things already enshrined. It's a question of finding it in the Constitution. The Constitution never said if you owe somebody, you don't have to pay them. Or if you ask a question, it is understood. If you are asked a question in the interest of good governance, you ought to give an answer within
Wait,
a specific time frame.
oh, I agree with you, but the way this parliament has been run in the last 10 years, it is impossible to get answers. It is
Right.
impossible
So,
because the
so
parliament compromised from the top
I,
go.
I'm not saying no. So we have to find, I would say, ways of making it happen. So we can discuss it as a people, and we can run a plebiscite on it. You know, we can run a plebiscite on it. This is what we want. Now let's go further. Let's go further. Suppose suppose the UNC puts that into their manifesto. These are the legal changes we want made. These are illegal changes. So they get into power on that basis. Now, the question of majority or whether it's a simple majority or so is a different matter. But at least you're going in with a mandate to do certain things. Do certain things.
Well, you
I'd,
said.
I'd given the I'd given the leader, for example. I'm familiar with the shortcomings in the banking sector. Do you know we do not have a law about truth in lending? Truth in lending.
Yeah.
Do you know we do not have a law in anti-extortionate practices by banks? Do you know we do not have a law concerning our APR? APR meaning to say annual percentage rate.
Mm-hmm.
Simple, simple things. These are archaic. So those are the things you have to tell the nation. It's in my manifesto. When I come, we are going to make these changes. In India, I understand that banks of probably branches of a certain size, they must have a toilet for the people. They
Mm-hmm.
must have a toilet. So these are bread and butter issues that we must be put into the manifesto because that becomes a contract with the citizens of this country.
Yeah.
That's a very, very important document, very important document.
No, you're
And it
right.
has to be realistic,
Mm-hmm.
anti-extortionate. Do you know anti-extortionate laws in the developed country has been there for years? Discriminatory laws and so on, like minorities or women financing and all of that. There should be no discrimination. Anybody could raise that as an issue. So I'm saying there's so many things. Put it there that you feel comfortable when you get into the power. You can deal with bread and butter issues that immediately impacts upon the ordinary citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I've written a lot about malpractice. Say, for example, in India, when a bank quotes the prime rate is the rate that you give your best customers. Prime rate, right? You can't
Mm-hmm.
go below, because if you go below the prime rate, it means to say you have to subsidize your income by overcharging on other people.
Mm-hmm.
So the prime rate now, there could be simple laws on that as well. Simple laws, because they're subsidizing, they're giving large corporations prime -3. So therefore, they have to make it up now by charging the ordinary citizens a further 3%.
Correct.
So I hope I'm getting across the point that the manifesto is too important to just be overlooked. You can't promise all kinds of things in the manifesto, and when you get into power, you see an empty treasury and start reeling back. And that's what happening with Starmer in the UK. In fact, they found Starmer's recordings where they all saying, okay, don't worry, we know the true state of financial affairs, but let's make this promise. We know we can't keep it, but it will get us into government. Now that is fraud.
No,
Yeah,
no,
listen.
you're very correct. They have to be realistic about what is being offered to the electorate,
Electorate, yes,
and
yes.
and and be measured in terms of how they present it and how much they present, um, not knowing the true state of affairs in the treasury,
That
and
is correct. That is correct.
that is
Because
important
because
in
they are in opposition, they are in a position to ask all these questions. Now, what I hear you saying is that government do answer, and therein lies the problem. Therein
yeah,
lies a big problem.
it's impossible to get a correct answer, a straight answer, or even an answer, because they talk all sorts of nonsense instead of. I've listened to all the parliament questions, and I can tell you, sometimes I feel to destroy my TV.
Y- but that's where you have.
Opposition have fought them tooth and nail, but they refuse.
Yeah, no, no, no. There's no question. I mean, I've seen the representation in government has been in parliament has been very strong. But I'm saying some strategies have to be developed, and suppose you put it in your manifesto. Look, three strikes out, and you're out. Put it there so the population will say that makes sense. You can't be asking government ministers to answer simple questions, and they're ducking. They're ducking. In Guyana, I think all the contracts and so on. I think it's available to the public. All the terms of the contract. You know, you can't close a deal and say that is secret. That is my and your money they're dealing with. They can't tell me a secret.
Yeah,
Well,
up to now we can't get no answer for the amount of trips Chot Young make to Venezuela. We can't get no disclosure on DLC coming to Trinidad during the COVID. We can't get no disclosure what took place there. There's a lot of unaccountability on trips. But go
Right?
ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask this question. There's no harm in putting that to the courts and ask them, look, we're not getting an answer. This is contrary to our legitimate expectation, and let the court decide. Let the court decide. They're spending people's money. There's a fiduciary duty. In fact, there should be minutes of all those meetings. The parliament would like to see the minutes. You have to think outside the box now. Suppose you put that in court. Okay, no problem. So it goes to court. Yeah, a defense. What defense they going to say? You put it in court. These are legitimate expectations, information that you need for you as the opposition to function in the interest of the nation. So you put them in court, not answering this and that and the next, and however you want to put together a case. I think the UNC, no question, have brilliant minds, legal minds. Put it in court and let the court decide.
Well, we have a guy called Ravi Balgobin. He did quite a bit. We need a few people like he to
Is he
do
a
that.
lawyer? Is he a lawyer?
No, 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 he's not. He's not a lawyer, but
yeah,
he
yeah.
utilized
I think
he
he
utilized Anand Ramlogan, and I believe in a few instances there.
no, but
No, but
The
I find Ravi has won many cases.
yeah, I think
Yeah, he did.
he is
Well,
an
well, right. So why not you put together a legal fund and just send Stuart a questionnaire, and if he doesn't, just send it to the courts and say, look how many efforts we try to get this information, but everything well documented. Put the matter in court. Put the matter in court. Put the prime minister. He was in breach. He was in breach when he dealt with the commissioner of police in the first instance. Major
With the
breaches.
merit list, with the merit list,
Yes,
and
yes.
then he said he never do that, and then he come out and say he did it, and nobody can ask him no question. The prime minister should be prosecuted for that incident. He should be
Suppose,
prosecuted
listen,
there.
all right. So I'm saying over the last 10 years, I'm sure there are 10 things you could ask to file a case against the prime minister. I'm sure. 10.
well. I have
Now,
asked.
Gary Griffith, let me ask you this. Gary Griffith, he was line up, and I understand that he was third in line. Third in line. But he was given the position. That again is a breach. Major breach.
Well, if they can justify why they gave him the position based on
No,
other,
you can't unless somebody would have done evaluation and so on, unless it clearly states that the prime minister or another committee could override it. But they'll have to explain the reasons why. But we know the reasons why. The reasons were very clear, and this might be circumstantial evidence because he himself was accused of certain things, right? When he was
correct,
in the UNC. Am I right?
correct.
So now you gave him position because you want him to talk about the others. You want him to talk about the others.
But they were hoping they could utilize it. But now we've seen this latest fiasco here with the commissioner of police. So the way I'm looking at it, right, is that with all that we're dealing with and the lack of police resources, you found it necessary to utilize police resources to arrest and humiliate the commissioner of police for signing off on two weapons for the security forces. Now we have X amount of guns coming into our borders illegally. You not focus on that, right? We have criminals with the most sophisticated weapons out there, and you not focus on that. You focus on arresting and humiliating the police commissioner. For what? This is a
No,
witch
that is
hunt.
true. That is true because they're going to cause consternation and conflict among the police force. is going to cause. So
It caused
they
a
have weakened.
major breakdown in the trust. You
Yes,
know,
yes, that is true. That is very true. Listen, Trinidad has become a basket case. Let's hope the whole bottom don't fall out. I think at this point it's the call for elections. It seems to be in the air. But be well prepared for it. And every straw has a value. Every straw. Don't bad talk nobody. You need everyone on board. And whatever whatever alliances you can develop now, take it. What has to happen though is there must be an agreement for conflict resolution. Conflict resolution, one party COP might say you're going wrong, etc. etc. No problem. Let us refer to the agreement among the parties for conflict resolution. So who do they go to? We can establish, we can, I would like to see a council of elders with UNC, so to resolve conflict within UNC. Because every time they have this internal voting and so on, party split, and you have to get back. A lot of effort then is spent on getting it back. So I think it's a wrong way of choosing the leader. When you go to choose the best team for West Indies, you don't put it to a vote. You don't put it to a vote. But anyway, so with regards to conflict resolution among the parties, whether PEP, I think Prakash wants to come on board. I think that's a very valuable addition. Um, and whoever else want to come on board is to have a conflict resolution that if somebody don't disagree, if they disagree with certain things, we could refer it to a body of individuals. Those individuals don't have to be Trinidadian. They don't have to be. They can be of Trinidadians living abroad or anywhere in the world. Because now with communications, you can easily put that team together. So it's something you all should think about, because conflict resolution and all the teams must agree to abide by the decisions of that select committee. So you all can
you
think
know,
about it because it,
usually you end up in a situation where the man who bring the one penny to the dollar wants to rule the whole dollar. So,
well,
you
that
know,
happened in St. Vincent.
yeah.
That happened in St. Vincent, Gary. You remember one guy, he got one seat, and the other two parties got equal. And he said, no problem, I'll join you, make me prime minister. So you're correct. You're correct. But think about it. So we have a committee that what conflict resolution to prevent what happened the last time around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good idea. That's a very an excellent idea, as a
Yeah,
matter.
let everybody
Well,
sign off to it.
definitely. You know, well,
Remember, politicians and lawyers by nature. I hope you all are not lawyers. Otherwise, I'm
Not,
walking into the lion's mouth. But
not at
I
all.
say people has egos now. I'd mentioned that earlier, and ego's a hell of a thing. It takes you in different directions. Um, any other questions? I mean, I could talk all night. So
yeah, no. I want to bring you back on a few more sessions, and I also want to bring you back, in any latest, you know, statements that you are making, anything that you're bringing to the population. I want to be able to bring it in a visual manner towards, the population, not only reading what you say, but I want you to be able to reiterate it here, on what you're advising, to the country. Also, I want to do something where you can show us about your little farm that you have going there, what you are trying one of these days when you are able to do that. So with that, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Ram, for joining us. And Trini, you have anything else to say?
No, no. I want to thank him also for some interesting discussion and some interesting ideas that we brainstormed basically here, and I'll definitely communicate with you privately, Mr. Seereeram, about some of your agriculture ideas
uh,
because I'm looking for ideas in that area.
I'd be delighted, and thank you for inviting me, Gary. And Trini is my school name, so when you called Trini, I was wondering how you knew that. That's
So
my school name.
yeah. So we listen. We value your experience and knowledge, and it's something I want to be able to keep in the forefront, and and in the digital media. So we're going to broadcast as much as what you have to say as possible. So that again, I want to thank you very much for taking the time, and we will definitely be in touch with you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
All
And
right.
I want to thank our listening audience for taking the time to join us. And as I mentioned, this is a platform to unify our people and to bring everyone on board inside, outside the country to work together for a better country. I believe everyone has some kind of a value to make a contribution. We have a lot of people outside the country that is very experienced, are experts in different fields that can make a contribution. So I do want to be inclusive on that. With that, I want to thank everyone and say good night to everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, everyone. Thank you.